This audio is going to be in regard to the topic of Ḥuqot haGoyim, or the religious prohibition for Jews to not go in the ways of the nations, or to follow or practice the customs of the nations. The source for the prohibition is in the Torah and Vayiqra chapter 18 verse 3, where it states, "You shall not copy the practices of the land of Egypt where you dwelt, or the land of Canaan to which I am taking you, nor shall you follow their laws." The second source is in chapter 20 verse 23, where it states, "You shall not follow the practices of the nation that I'm driving out before you." So those are the sources in the Torah which breed the category of Ḥuqot haGoyim, or the synonymous term Darkei HaEmori, the way of the Amorites. There's a set of practices. Well, before I say that, I'll say, although there is a prohibition against Ḥuqot haGoyim, the whole point of this audio is to ask the question, what does Ḥuqot haGoyim even mean, considering there's so many customs of the nations that found their way into Jewish law? So there's a set of practices from the Egyptians which find their way into Jewish law, namely tefillin, the office of the Kohen, and the Egyptian names and the Mishkan. So the tefillin, there's evidence of that in the Torah itself. Considering the word for tefillin in the Torah, it's actually not tefillin, it's ṭoṭafot, which is two African words. And this is mentioned even in the Talmud in a couple of places. I'll put the sources in the description. The office of a Kohen, I haven't confirmed this in writing, but I heard this in a Devar Torah by a rabbi named Shimon Dudai. And this is a Moroccan rabbi who is the rabbi of a conservative synagogue, so take that for what it is. But he stated that the Kohen, the word Kohen finds its origin in Egyptian hieroglyphs, and it meant ministers of writing. And in that regard, Israel, his whole point of the Devar Torah was that Israel fulfilled their role as a Mamlechet Kohanim by being prolific authors, writers, being strict with Dikduk, Hebrew grammar, writers and readers. And so the names that we find from Egypt, like Moshe, are for Pinchas and others. And then also, of course, the Mishkan, which is modeled after Paro's tent. And that's spoken about. I'll reference that link in the description as well by Professor Michael Mohan. Other practices of the nations which find their way into Torah is the qorbanot, which even the Rambam states in his Guide for the Perplexed that this was just a holdover from pagan practices repurposed for the Israelites. Even stories from other nations, like the myth story, which is a universal story told by many different cultures. The snake being raised on the pole in Bemidbar 21. This imagery, symbolism, is used for like health or healing. By other nations. Abraham's covenant with the animals being cut into two halves. This was a common ancient Near Eastern practice. The 12 tribes, their symbols are just astrology. If you look at their symbols, they're just the constellations. The 10 Commandments come from the 42 laws of Ma'at. Even the monarchy and the king. The Torah states itself that this is a practice of the nations, and the Creator actually chastises them for wanting to be like the nations in this regard. The Hebrew months of the Jewish calendar are just Babylonian gods, the names of the Babylonian gods. The concept of leaning on Pesach, which nobody really does anymore, but in the Talmud it's mentioned as a halakha. This is taken from the Roman nobility. The dreidel on Hanukkah is from Europe. The challah bread on Shabbat is from Europe or from Christians. The Sephardic garb for the rabbis, the chief Sephardic rabbi, for example. This is just a practice of the Christian clergy of Orthodox Christians. The Western Sephardim with the top hats from colonial dress of the British. Kaparot, even on the surface, looks pagan. And there's many other practices, but those are just some to name to make the point. How many customs are allowed from the nations to be included? So up to the point where Darkei HaEmori or Ḥuqot haGoyim is considered as not being violated. I don't know. There's so many. But a critic could say that Israel was prolific in pioneering the cultural appropriation movement. And I could understand why they would think that, but I think there's a positive spin you can put on it. And I think the positive spin is that humans are much more alike than they are similar. And so to find similarities amongst different cultures and religions and societies seems to me obvious, because we all have similar desires and aspirations and needs and access to raw material. And so doesn't seem to me that it's a problem that there's all these similarities. It does bring a question: what does Ḥuqot haGoyim mean? In a traditional sense, the rabbis define it, but if you look at all these examples that I just provided, it does beg the question. I'll end by saying I'm thankful that I learned the Torah tradition, which is workable in the world, a Sephardic humanist tradition. Sephardic because of the teachers, not because I myself am Sephardic, but the teachers I learned from are Sephardic. And I can summarize this outlook, this worldview, in this, that Israel is a chosen nation for a purpose. The purpose is to uphold the covenant of the Torah, but not at the exclusion of the other nations having their own chosenness and purpose in relationship to the Creator. And in that regard, there's a shared humanity in upholding the imperative in Bereshit, la'avdol shamra, to tend and to guard the garden. And this approach, the Sephardic humanist approach, takes Tselem Elohim very seriously and understands that all humans have a common origin. As opposed to another type of rabbinic tradition, which looks at Tselem Elohim as really just applying to Jews, and also kind of sees chosenness as chosen at the exclusion of everyone else. And so I don't think that view is all that healthy, and I'm thankful that I have come into contact with teachers who taught me another way to view Torah and halakha. And in that regard, although I notice all these different practices of the nations, it's not so much of an issue. It just shows that there's a lot more in common that we have than there's different. And I'll end with that and say thank you again for listening.